You know that moment when your entire world just crumbles right in front of your eyes? When everything you believed in, every person you trusted, every memory you cherished suddenly becomes a lie. I lived that moment. And let me tell you, nothing, absolutely nothing could have prepared me for what my own parents did to me. This is my story, and I need to tell it because maybe, just maybe, it will save someone else from the heartbreak I went through. It was supposed to be the happiest time of my life. I was getting married to the love of my life, planning the wedding of my dreams, surrounded by family who I thought loved me unconditionally. But behind all those smiles, behind all those hugs and words of encouragement, there was a betrayal so deep, so calculated, that even now, months later, I still wake up with tears streaming down my face. My parents, the two people who brought me into this world, who raised me, who I would have trusted with my life, they destroyed me in ways I never thought possible. And the worst part, they did it with a smile on their faces. Before I continue, I need you to do something for me. Smash that like button right now. Subscribe to this channel and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, because stories like mine need to be heard, and your support helps get this message out to people who might be going through the same thing. My name is Sarah, and 6 months ago I was a completely different person. I was happy, optimistic, full of dreams and hope for the future. I had just gotten engaged to Marcus, my boyfriend of 4 years. Marcus was everything I had ever wanted in a partner. He was kind, successful, supportive, and he loved me with a depth that made me feel safe in this chaotic world. When he got down on one knee at our favorite restaurant, tears streaming down his face as he asked me to be his wife, I said yes without a single hesitation. It was the easiest decision I had ever made. I remember running to my parents' house that same evening, practically bursting through their front door, my hand stretched out showing off the beautiful ring that now sat on my finger. My mom screamed with joy. Actually screamed. She grabbed my hand, pulled me into the tightest hug, and started crying. My dad, who was never really the emotional type, had tears in his eyes too. He shook Marcus's hand, pulled him into a hug, and told him he was getting the best daughter anyone could ask for. That moment felt perfect. It felt like the beginning of something beautiful. My parents and I had always been close. I'm an only child, so naturally I was the center of their world growing up. They worked hard to give me a good life. My dad owned a small but successful accounting firm, and my mom worked as a real estate agent. We weren't wealthy by any means, but we were comfortable. We took vacations, I went to a good college, and I never really wanted for anything essential. They taught me the value of hard work, the importance of family, and how to be independent. Or at least, I thought they did. Growing up, my mom was my best friend. We would go shopping together, have spa days, watch movies, and talk about everything. She was the first person I called when something good happened, and the shoulder I cried on when things went wrong. My dad was my protector, my hero. He taught me how to ride a bike, helped me with my math homework, scared away the boys who weren't good enough, and walked me through every major decision in my life. I trusted them completely, blindly. And that trust would become my biggest mistake. When Marcus and I started planning the wedding, I was over the moon. I had been dreaming about my wedding day since I was a little girl. I had Pinterest boards full of ideas, notebooks filled with sketches and plans, magazine clippings that I had been saving for years. I wanted a beautiful ceremony in a garden venue I had fallen in love with, surrounded by flowers and natural light. I wanted a live band, a photographer who could capture every precious moment, a dress that would make me feel like a princess, and a reception where all our friends and family could celebrate with us. Marcus and I sat down and created a budget. We were both working good jobs, had been saving money, and we wanted to do this right. We calculated that we could afford a wedding that cost around $60,000. Now, I know that sounds like a lot to some people, and trust me, I wasn't trying to be extravagant or wasteful. But when you break it down, venue rental, catering for 150 guests, photography, videography, flowers, music, my dress, his suit, decorations, invitations, it all adds up quickly. We had the money saved, we had done our research, and we were comfortable with this budget. I was so excited to share all my plans with my parents. I invited my mom over for lunch one Saturday afternoon, and I spread out all my ideas on my dining room table. I showed her pictures of the venue, the color scheme I wanted, the style of dress I was dreaming about. I thought she would be just as excited as I was. And at first, she seemed to be. She smiled, she commented on how beautiful everything looked, she hugged me and told me how happy she was for me. But then, as we were finishing our coffee, her tone changed. She got this look on her face, kind of serious, kind of concerned. She reached across the table and took my hand in hers, and she said something that I should have paid more attention to. She said, "Honey, this all looks absolutely beautiful. But you know, weddings are just one day, one single day. Have you and Marcus really thought about whether spending this much money on one day is the wisest decision?" I remember laughing it off at first. I told her that yes, we had thought about it extensively and that we were comfortable with our budget. We had worked hard, saved responsibly, and this was something we both wanted. I reminded her that we weren't asking them for money, that Marcus and I were paying for everything ourselves. She nodded, smiled, and said she understood. But there was something in her eyes, something I couldn't quite read at the time, that should have been my first warning sign. A few days later, my dad called me. He asked if we could meet for dinner, just the two of us, because he wanted to talk to me about something important. I agreed, thinking maybe he wanted to discuss a father-daughter dance song or give me some sentimental family heirloom to wear on my wedding day. We met at a quiet Italian restaurant, ordered our food, and made small talk for a while. Then, just like my mom had done, his demeanor shifted. He leaned forward, his face serious, and he started talking about financial responsibility. He told me that he and my mom had been discussing my wedding plans, and they were concerned. Concerned. That word stuck with me. He said that spending $60,000 on a single day seemed excessive, especially when Marcus and I were still relatively young and building our lives together. He talked about how that money could be used as a down payment on a house, or invested for our future, or saved for when we eventually had children. I sat there, listening to him, feeling this strange mix of emotions. Part of me felt defensive, like I needed to justify our decisions. But another part of me felt guilty, like maybe he was right. Maybe we were being irresponsible. Maybe we were caught up in the excitement and not thinking clearly about our future. My dad had always been good with money, always made smart financial decisions. He had built his business from nothing. Why wouldn't I trust his advice? He reached across the table and squeezed my hand, and he said, "Sweetheart, your mother and I just want what's best for you. We want you to start your marriage on solid financial ground, not in debt or having blown through your savings on flowers and photographers. We love you, and we're just trying to look out for your future." How could I argue with that? How could I be upset with parents who were just trying to protect me, to guide me toward making better choices? I told him I would think about it, that Marcus and I would discuss whether we could scale things back a bit. He smiled, hugged me, paid for dinner, and told me how proud he was of me for being so mature and open-minded. That night I talked to Marcus. I told him about both conversations about my parents' concerns. Marcus, bless his heart, was immediately skeptical. He said, "Sarah, it's our money. We've saved it, we've planned for this, and we're not putting ourselves in any kind of financial hardship. Why are they so concerned about how we spend our own money?" But I defended them. I told him they were just being parents, just trying to help us make smart decisions. I told him that maybe they had a point, that maybe we could have a beautiful wedding without spending quite so much. Marcus wasn't happy about it, but he loved me, and he could see that this was weighing on me. He said that if I wanted to look at ways to reduce costs, he would support me. But he made me promise that we wouldn't sacrifice the things that were truly important to us, and that we wouldn't let other people make our decisions for us. I promised. But looking back now, I broke that promise in so many ways. Over the next 2 weeks, my parents didn't let up. Not even a little bit. My mom started sending me articles about couples who had beautiful weddings on tiny budgets. She would text me links with messages like, "Look how gorgeous this backyard wedding was, and they only spent $10,000. Or, "This couple got married at a community center and it was so elegant." Every single article, every single text, was a subtle message that what I wanted was too much, was wasteful, was irresponsible. My dad started bringing up the wedding every single time we talked. He would ask questions like, "Have you thought more about what we discussed?" Or, "Have you and Marcus considered a smaller venue?" Or, "Do you really need a professional photographer when everyone has great cameras on their phones these days?" Each question chipped away at my confidence, at my excitement, at my dreams. And then they brought in reinforcements. My mom's sister, my Aunt Linda, called me one afternoon. We weren't particularly close, so the call surprised me. She went on and on about how she had spent a fortune on her daughter's wedding, and how, looking back, she wished they had been more practical. She said the marriage ended in divorce 3 years later anyway, and all that money felt wasted. The implication was clear: don't make the same mistake. Even my grandmother got involved. My sweet, elderly grandmother who I visited every Sunday. She sat me down with tea and cookies and told me that in her day, weddings were simple affairs. She married my grandfather in a small church ceremony with just family present, and they had been happy for 52 years before he passed. She said that the size of the wedding didn't determine the strength of the marriage, and that starting with less stress and more money in the bank was a blessing. I felt like I was being attacked from all sides. Every family member, every conversation, every interaction seemed designed to make me feel guilty about wanting the wedding I had dreamed of. And the worst part was that they were all saying it with love, with concern, with what seemed like genuine care for my well-being. How could I be angry at people who just wanted me to be happy and financially secure? Marcus noticed the change in me. I went from being excited and energized about wedding planning to being stressed and anxious. I started second-guessing every decision, questioning every expense. Should we really spend $3,000 on flowers when we could get grocery store bouquets for a few hundred? Did we really need a videographer when we were already paying for a photographer? Could we find a cheaper venue, even if it wasn't quite as beautiful as the one I had fallen in love with? I scheduled a meeting with my parents. I needed to understand exactly what they thought we should do. We met at their house, in the living room where I had spent countless hours growing up. My mom made coffee, my dad sat in his favorite armchair, and I sat on the couch across from them, feeling like a child about to be lectured rather than a grown woman planning her own wedding. My mom started the conversation. She said, "Honey, your father and I have been doing some research, and we think we have some ideas that could help you have a beautiful wedding while being much more financially responsible." She pulled out a folder, an actual folder that they had prepared, full of printouts and notes. They had found a community center that rented for $500. They had researched DIY decoration ideas. They had a list of budget-friendly caterers. They suggested cutting the guest list in half, skipping the videographer entirely, finding a cheaper photographer, and buying a dress off the rack instead of getting one custom fitted. When I asked them what kind of budget they thought was reasonable, my dad said, "We think you could have a lovely wedding for around $15,000 to $20,000. That would still give you a nice day, but would leave you with $40,000 in savings. Think about what a difference that could make in your life." 15 to 20,000. They wanted me to cut my budget by 2/3. I felt sick. I felt angry, but I also felt this overwhelming guilt. Here were my parents, spending their time researching and planning, trying to help me, and I was sitting there feeling resentful. What kind of daughter was I? I told them I needed time to think, to talk to Marcus. They hugged me, told me they loved me, and reminded me that they only wanted what was best for me. I drove home in tears. Feeling torn between the wedding I wanted and the pressure from the people I loved most in the world. That night, Marcus and I had our first real fight about the wedding. He was furious, not at me, but at my parents. He said they were overstepping, that they were manipulating me, that something felt off about the whole situation. But I defended them again. I raised my voice, I cried. I accused him of not understanding how close I was to my family. I told him that maybe they were right, that maybe we were being selfish and short-sighted. Marcus looked at me with this expression of hurt and frustration, and he said, "Sarah, I will marry you in a courthouse wearing jeans if that's what you want. I will marry you in the most expensive venue in the state if that's what you want. But what I need to know is, what do you want? Not your parents, not your aunt, not your grandmother. You, what do you want?" I broke down, I sobbed, because the truth was I didn't know anymore. The constant pressure, the guilt, the questions, the articles, the suggestions, they had all worked exactly as intended. My parents had successfully made me doubt myself, doubt my choices, and doubt whether I deserved the wedding I had dreamed of. I felt confused, manipulated, and completely lost. And so, against every instinct Marcus had, against his better judgment, I agreed to downsize the wedding. I told myself it was my decision, that I was being mature and responsible. But deep down, I knew the truth. I wasn't making this choice freely. I was making it because I had been pressured, guilted, and worn down until I didn't have the strength to fight anymore. Over the next month, I became someone I didn't recognize. I canceled the beautiful garden venue I had fallen in love with and booked the community center my parents had suggested. Walking into that space, with its fluorescent lights and plain beige walls, I felt my heart sink. This wasn't what I had dreamed of. This wasn't the magical setting I had envisioned for the most important day of my life. But I forced a smile, told myself it would be fine, and signed the contract. The community center cost $500 compared to the $8,000 venue I had originally chosen. My parents praised me endlessly for this decision. My mom hugged me tight and told me how proud she was of me for being so practical. My dad actually teared up and said I was showing real maturity. Their approval felt good in the moment, like a warm blanket on a cold day. But underneath that warmth, there was this nagging feeling that something wasn't right. Next came the guest list. Marcus and I had originally planned for 150 people. We both had large families, lots of friends, colleagues we wanted to celebrate with. Cutting that list down to 75 people was one of the most painful things I had ever done. I sat at my laptop for hours, staring at names, trying to decide who made the cut and who didn't. My college roommate who I hadn't seen in a while. Cut. Marcus's favorite cousin who lived out of state. Cut. My dad's business partner who had known me since I was a child. Cut. Every name I deleted felt like a small betrayal. These were people who cared about us, who would have been happy to celebrate with us, who deserved to be part of our special day. But my parents kept reminding me that a smaller, more intimate wedding would be more meaningful anyway. "You'll actually get to spend time with each guest," my mom would say. "You won't be so overwhelmed and exhausted," my dad would add. They made it sound like I was gaining something rather than losing it. The photographer was next. I had found this incredible artist whose work made me cry. It was so beautiful. She captured emotions in a way that felt raw and real and absolutely perfect. Her package was $4,000, which included engagement photos, full day coverage, and a beautiful album. My parents said it was highway robbery. They found a guy who would do it for $800. When I looked at his portfolio, my heart sank. The photos were fine, just fine. Basic poses, standard shots, nothing that captured any real emotion or artistry. But my parents raved about what a great deal it was. I tried to protest. I showed my mom the difference between the two photographers' work. I explained that these photos would be what we had forever, the only way to remember the day decades from now. She looked at me with disappointment in her eyes and said, "Sarah, they're just pictures. What matters is the marriage, not the photographs. Are you really going to spend an extra $3,000 on vanity?" Vanity? That word hit me hard. Was I being vain? Was I being shallow for caring about having beautiful photos? My mom made me feel like wanting nice things for my own wedding was somehow a character flaw. And so, I booked the cheaper photographer, hatting myself a little bit more with each compromise. The dress shopping was supposed to be one of the best parts of wedding planning. I had imagined going to beautiful bridal boutiques with my mom and my best friend, trying on gorgeous gowns, having that magical moment when I found the one. And we did go to a few boutiques. I did find dresses that made me feel beautiful, but every single one that I loved, my mom found a reason to criticize. "That's $4,000 for a dress you'll wear once," she would say. Or, "That's beautiful, honey, but it's just not practical." Or, "Do you really need all that beadwork? Simpler is more elegant." She steered me away from the boutiques and toward department stores. We ended up at a discount bridal warehouse where I found a dress on the clearance rack for $600. It was fine. It was white, it fit, it was a wedding dress. But it didn't make me feel like a bride. It didn't make me feel beautiful or special or magical. When I looked at myself in the mirror wearing that dress, I wanted to cry. Not tears of joy like you're supposed to cry when you find your wedding dress, but tears of sadness and frustration. My best friend, Jessica, who had come with us, pulled me aside and whispered, "Sarah, if you don't love it, don't get it. This is your wedding dress." But my mom was standing right there, beaming, telling me how beautiful I looked and what a smart financial decision this was. So I bought the dress, and I felt a piece of my dream die. The same pattern continued with everything. The florist I wanted who created these stunning organic arrangements, replaced with basic flowers from a wholesale supplier that my mom said she and I could arrange ourselves the night before the wedding. The live band that would have filled the reception with energy and life, replaced with a playlist on Spotify and a rental sound system. The elegant plated dinner I had envisioned, replaced with a buffet from a budget catering company. Every single choice, every single detail was downsized, cheapened, stripped of the magic I had dreamed of. And through it all, my parents were there, praising me, telling me how proud they were, reminding me that I was making the right choices for my future. Marcus watched it all happen with growing concern and frustration, but I was so deep in the fog of guilt and manipulation that I couldn't see what he saw. By the time we had finished replanning the entire wedding, we had cut the budget down to $18,000. I had saved $42,000 from my original budget. My parents threw me a little celebration dinner for being so responsible. They toasted to my future, to my maturity, to the smart decisions I was making. I smiled and thanked them, but inside, I felt hollow. I felt like I had lost something precious, something I could never get back. Marcus tried to talk to me about it several times. He would hold me when I cried after particularly difficult planning sessions. He would remind me that we still had time to change things back, that our original budget was perfectly reasonable. But I was so emotionally exhausted from the constant pressure that I didn't have the energy to fight anymore. I just wanted it to be over. I wanted to get to the other side of the wedding and start my life with Marcus and put all of this stress behind me. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have possibly known, was that this was just the beginning. The worst was still to come. It started with small things, little details that didn't quite add up. About 2 months before the wedding, I was at my parents' house for Sunday dinner, something we did almost every week. I excused myself to use the bathroom, and on my way back, I passed by my dad's home office. The door was slightly open, and I could see him inside on the phone. He was speaking quietly, but I heard him say something that stopped me in my tracks. Yes, we should have the full amount by then. Sarah's wedding is going to be much smaller than planned, so that freed up exactly what we needed. I stood there, frozen in the hallway, straining to hear more. My dad continued, "I know it's been tight, but this is going to change everything for us. Just a few more months and we'll be set." My heart started pounding. What was he talking about? What full amount? Why was my wedding being connected to their finances? I waited until he hung up the phone and then I knocked on the door frame. He jumped slightly, clearly startled. "Oh, sweetheart, I didn't hear you come upstairs. Dinner ready." I asked him who he was talking to, trying to sound casual. He waved his hand dismissively and said it was just a client, boring work stuff. But there was something in his eyes, something uncomfortable, almost guilty. I didn't push it in the moment, but the conversation stuck with me, playing on repeat in my mind. A week later, I was having coffee with my mom at her favorite cafe. Her phone kept buzzing with text messages, and she kept ignoring them, which was unusual for her. Finally, she excused herself to take a call outside. Through the window, I could see her packing, looking stressed, her free hand gesturing as she spoke. When she came back inside, she looked flustered. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Oh yes, just some drama with a real estate deal. Nothing to worry about," she said, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. Then, about a week after that, I ran into my Aunt Linda at the grocery store. We chatted for a few minutes, and then she said something strange. "You know, your mother told me about their investment opportunity. I think it's really generous of you to help them out like this." I felt my stomach drop. "Help them out with what?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. My aunt looked confused. "With the... Oh, maybe I wasn't supposed to say anything. Forget I mentioned it." She quickly changed the subject and then said she had to run, leaving me standing in the cereal aisle feeling like the ground was shifting beneath my feet. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about these strange little moments, these odd comments and overheard conversations. I thought about how intensely my parents had pushed me to downsize the wedding, how they had involved other family members, how they had been so specific about the amount of money I should save. $40,000. That number kept circulating in my mind. I didn't want to be suspicious of my own parents. I felt guilty for even questioning their motives. They loved me, they had always been there for me, they had raised me and supported me my entire life. But something felt wrong, really wrong. Marcus noticed I was distracted and upset. When he asked what was bothering me, I told him about the strange phone call, the comment from my aunt, my mom's secretive behavior. He was quiet for a moment, and then he said, "Sarah, I think you need to ask them directly. Something has felt off about this whole situation from the beginning." But I couldn't bring myself to do it. The thought of confronting my parents, of accusing them of having ulterior motives, made me feel sick. What if I was wrong? What if I was reading into innocent coincidences and making them into something sinister? I would damage my relationship with them over my own paranoia. So I stayed quiet, but I started paying closer attention. Over the next 2 weeks, I noticed more things. My parents seemed stressed, more stressed than I had ever seen them. They were both taking phone calls at odd hours. My dad looked tired all the time, with dark circles under his eyes. My mom was distracted during our conversations, forgetting things she would normally remember. Something was definitely going on with them, something they weren't telling me. Then came the day that changed everything. I was supposed to meet my mom for lunch to finalize some last-minute wedding details. I arrived at the restaurant 15 minutes early and texted her to let her know I was there. She replied saying she was running late, stuck in a meeting, and would be there in about 30 minutes. I decided to wait in my car and return some work emails. About 10 minutes later, I saw my mom's car pull into the parking lot, but she didn't get out. She sat in her car, talking on the phone. I could see her through her windshield. She looked upset, agitated. I watched as she ran her hands through her hair, a gesture she only made when she was really stressed. I felt wrong for watching her, but I couldn't look away. Then she got out of her car, still on the phone, and walked toward the back of the parking lot, away from the restaurant entrance. I don't know what possessed me to do it. Maybe it was all the accumulated suspicion. Maybe it was instinct. But I quietly got out of my car and moved closer, positioning myself behind a large SUV where I could hear her but she couldn't see me. What I heard in the next 5 minutes destroyed me. "I know we're cutting it close," my mom was saying, her voice strained. "But we had to do it. We had no choice. If we didn't invest this money now, we would have lost everything." Silence as the person on the other end spoke. "Yes, 45,000. We pulled it from our savings, and we convinced Sarah to cut down her wedding budget so we'd have enough to meet the minimum investment threshold." My blood ran cold. I literally felt the color drain from my face. "She doesn't know, and she can't know," my mom continued. "This investment is going to double, maybe triple our money in 6 months. When it pays out, we can give her a generous gift, help her with a house down payment, something. She'll understand eventually. And if this goes the way Robert says it will, we'll be able to retire early. We'll finally have the financial security we've been working toward our whole lives." I pressed my hand against my mouth to keep from making a sound. Tears were streaming down my face. "I feel terrible about it, I really do," my mom said, and at least she had the decency to sound guilty. "But she's young, she'll have other opportunities. This is our one chance. We had to take it. And honestly, she doesn't need an expensive wedding. The marriage is what matters, not one fancy party." I couldn't listen anymore. I ran back to my car, my whole body shaking. I sat there, gripping the steering wheel, trying to process what I had just heard. My parents hadn't been concerned about my financial future. They hadn't been trying to protect me or teach me responsibility. They had manipulated me into downsizing my wedding so they could use the money I saved. Money that was never theirs, to fund their own investment scheme. They had guilted me, pressured me, weaponized my love and trust for them, all so they could benefit financially. Every conversation, every article, every family member they had recruited to their cause, it had all been a calculated manipulation, and I had fallen for it completely. I texted my mom that I was sick and had to cancel lunch. She responded with concern, asking if I was okay, if I needed anything. The hypocrisy of it made me want to scream. I drove home in a daze, barely seeing the road through my tears. When I got home, Marcus was there, working from home that day. He took one look at my face and knew something catastrophic had happened. I collapsed into his arms and told him everything I had overheard. As I spoke the words out loud, the betrayal became even more real, even more painful. Marcus held me while I sobbed. Then, when I had cried myself out, he pulled back and looked at me with an expression I had never seen before. It was protective, fierce, and absolutely furious. "Sarah," he said quietly, "we are going to make this right. I promise you we are going to make this right." And in that moment, through the pain and the betrayal and the heartbreak, something shifted inside me. The fog of manipulation lifted. I saw clearly for the first time in months. My parents had stolen from me. Not money exactly, because the savings were technically still mine. But they had stolen my dreams, my joy, my special moments, all for their own gain. They had used my love as a weapon against me. And they were going to pay for it. I spent the rest of that day crying. Not just quiet tears, but the kind of crying that comes from deep in your soul, the kind that leaves you exhausted and hollow. I cried for the wedding I had given up. I cried for the trust that had been shattered. I cried for the parents I thought I had, who apparently never existed. Most of all, I cried for how stupid I felt. How could I have been so blind? How could I have let them manipulate me so completely? Marcus stayed with me through all of it. He didn't try to fix it or minimize it. He just held me, brought me water, and let me feel everything I needed to feel. By the time evening came, I was emotionally drained, but something else was emerging through the pain. Anger. Pure, justified, burning anger. "What kind of people do this?" I asked Marcus, my voice hoarse from crying. "What kind of parents manipulate their own daughter's wedding for their own financial gain? They watched me struggle with every decision. They watched me cry over cutting my guest list. They saw how much it hurt me to give up the things I wanted, and they just kept pushing because it benefited them." Marcus sat beside me on our couch, his jaw tight with his own anger. "They're selfish, Sarah. I'm sorry, I know they're your parents, but what they did is unforgivable." I thought about all those conversations, all those guilt trips. My mom sending me articles about budget weddings. My dad's lectures about financial responsibility. My aunt's convenient phone call about her daughter's expensive wedding and divorce. My grandmother's story about her simple ceremony. Had they all been in on it? Had my entire family conspired to manipulate me? "The investment," I said suddenly, sitting up. "My mom said something about a guy named Robert, and that the investment would double or triple their money in 6 months. Marcus, that sounds like." "A scam," Marcus finished. "Sarah, legitimate investments don't promise to double your money in 6 months. That's exactly what scam artists promise." My stomach twisted. As angry as I was, as betrayed as I felt, these were still my parents. If they had fallen for some investment scam, they could lose everything. They could end up in serious financial trouble. Part of me wanted to warn them, to protect them despite what they had done to me. But a bigger part of me, the part that was emerging from months of manipulation and control, thought, they made their choice. They chose this investment over my happiness. They chose their greed over my trust. Why should I protect them from the consequences of their own actions? "I need to know exactly what they did," I told Marcus. "I need to know the full extent of this." Over the next few days, I became a detective. I started paying attention to everything in a way I never had before. I accepted every dinner invitation from my parents, smiled through every conversation, and watched them carefully. They had no idea that I knew. They continued to be loving and supportive, asking about final wedding preparations, telling me how beautiful everything was going to be. The lies came so easily to them. That might have hurt more than anything. I also did something I wasn't particularly proud of, but desperate times called for desperate measures. I still had a key to my parents' house from years ago, from back when I used to check on their place when they traveled. One afternoon, when I knew they were both at work, I let myself in. My hands were shaking as I unlocked the door. I felt like a criminal, sneaking into my own childhood home, but I needed answers. I went straight to my dad's home office, the same office where I had overheard that phone call weeks ago. His desk was neat and organized, like always, but I started going through drawers, looking for anything related to this mysterious investment. I found it in the third drawer I checked, a folder labeled Paradise Investment Opportunity. Inside were glossy brochures promising incredible returns, testimonials from supposedly satisfied investors, and contracts. So many contracts. As I read through them, my heart sank. This had scam written all over it. Promises of 30% returns in 6 months. Exclusive opportunities in some vague tropical real estate development. Testimonials that sounded fake and generic. But what really caught my attention was the investment amount, $45,000. The exact amount my mom had mentioned on the phone. I pulled out my phone and took pictures of everything. Every page, every document, every piece of evidence. Then I found something else. A ledger where my dad had been tracking their finances. I saw entries for their savings account, and my heart broke all over again. They had withdrawn $30,000 from their savings. They were short $15,000 to meet the minimum investment threshold. And there, in my dad's handwriting, was a note. Sarah's wedding budget reduction should cover the difference. They had planned this. They hadn't just taken advantage of an opportunity. They had calculated exactly how much they needed and then systematically pressured me to save that exact amount. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. This was premeditated manipulation. I took pictures of the ledger too, then carefully put everything back exactly as I had found it. As I locked the door behind me and walked back to my car, I felt different. The sadness was still there, the betrayal still hurt, but it was hardening into something else. Resolve. That evening, Marcus and I sat down together and I showed him everything I had found. He looked through the photos, his expression growing darker with each swipe. "This is definitely a scam," he confirmed. "I've seen operations like this before. They take people's money, give them some small returns at first to build trust, then either disappear or come up with reasons why the big payout is delayed. Eventually, the whole thing collapses and investors lose everything." "How long do you think before it falls apart?" I asked. "Could be months, could be a year. These things vary. But Sarah, they're going to lose that money, probably all of it." I nodded slowly. An idea was forming in my mind, something that felt both perfectly just and slightly terrifying. "Marcus, our wedding is in 6 weeks." "I know," he said, watching me carefully. "They think they've won. They think they manipulated me successfully, got what they wanted, and I'm none the wiser. They're probably feeling pretty proud of themselves." "Probably," Marcus agreed. "What if we let them keep thinking that? What if we let them come to the wedding, believing everything is fine, believing they got away with it? And then, in front of everyone, in front of the family they recruited to help manipulate me, we expose exactly what they did." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "Sarah, are you sure? That's nuclear. There's no coming back from something like that." "Your relationship with your parents will be." "Over," I interrupted. "Marcus, it's already over. The parents I thought I had don't exist. The people who did this to me aren't the people I thought they were. Maybe they never were, I just couldn't see it before." He reached over and took my hand. "If this is what you want, I'm with you, completely. But I need you to be absolutely sure, because once we do this, it's done." I thought about my mom holding my hand and telling me I was being vain for wanting a good photographer. I thought about my dad's tears when he told me how proud he was of my maturity. I thought about that cheap wedding dress hanging in my closet, the downgraded venue, the cut guest list, all the dreams I had sacrificed because I trusted them. "I'm sure," I said. Over the next 2 weeks, Marcus and I planned our revenge as carefully as my parents had planned their manipulation. But we also did something else, something that felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. We started putting my real wedding back together. I called the garden venue I had originally fallen in love with. By some miracle, they had a cancellation for our date. I booked it immediately. I contacted the photographer whose work had made me cry and explained my situation. She was so moved by my story that she agreed to fit me in, even though she had technically been booked. I found a dress, a real dress that made me feel like a bride. It cost more than I had originally budgeted, and I didn't care even a little bit. We reinstated our original guest list. We booked the band. We hired the florist. Every single thing I had given up, we brought back. Better yet, Marcus insisted on covering some of the additional costs because, as he said, "Your parents already stole enough from you. This is our day, and it's going to be perfect. The interesting part was maintaining the charade with my parents. I had to pretend that the wedding was still the downsized version. I couldn't let them suspect that I knew anything. So when my mom asked about final details, I talked about the community center. When my dad asked if I needed help setting up the DIY decorations, I thanked him and said we had it under control. I smiled, I hugged them. I played the role of the dutiful daughter who had learned her lesson about financial responsibility. It was harder than I expected. Every time I looked at them, I saw the manipulation, the lies, the betrayal. But I held it together because I knew what was coming. 1 week before the wedding, I did something else. I contacted several family members who had been part of the pressure campaign. My Aunt Linda, my grandmother, a few of my dad's siblings. I told each of them that I needed to talk to them privately, that it was important. I met with each one individually and asked them a simple question. Did my parents ask you to pressure me about downsizing my wedding? The reactions varied, but the truth came out. My Aunt Linda admitted that my mom had called her and asked her to share that story about her daughter's expensive wedding and divorce. My grandmother confessed that my dad had suggested she talk to me about the value of simple weddings. One of my dad's brothers told me that my parents had asked him to mention at a family gathering how much debt he went into for his daughter's wedding and how he regretted it. They had recruited an entire army to break me down, and every single person they recruited had no idea why. They thought they were helping my parents protect me from making a financial mistake. When I told each of them the truth, when I showed them the evidence of the investment scam and explained how my parents had manipulated the situation for their own gain, they were horrified. "Are you going to tell them you know?" my grandmother asked, her elderly hands trembling as she held her teacup. "Yes," I said, "at the wedding in front of everyone." She was quiet for a moment, then she nodded. "Good. What they did was wrong, Sarah. I'm so sorry I was part of it, even unknowingly." I asked each family member I spoke with to keep this information to themselves until the wedding. I wanted my parents to walk into that day completely unsuspecting. They all agreed. Some because they felt guilty for their unwitting participation, others because they were angry at being used as pawns in my parents' scheme. The night before the wedding, I barely slept. I was nervous, not about marrying Marcus. That was the one thing I was completely certain about, but about what I was going to do. I played out the confrontation in my mind 100 different ways. I rehearsed what I would say, how I would say it. Part of me still felt guilty, still felt like maybe I was going too far. But then I would think about my mom looking at wedding dresses with me, steering me away from the ones I loved, convincing me that wanting to feel beautiful on my wedding day was vanity. I would think about my dad's manufactured tears when he told me how proud he was of my financial maturity, when really he was just proud of how successfully he had manipulated me. The guilt would evaporate, replaced by righteous anger. Marcus stayed up with me, holding me, reassuring me. "Tomorrow is going to be hard," he said. "But after tomorrow, we start fresh. New life, new boundaries, and a marriage built on honesty and trust, everything your parents' relationship apparently isn't." The morning of the wedding, I woke up with a strange sense of calm. This was it. The day I had been planning for, both the celebration and the reckoning. I got ready with my bridesmaids at the beautiful venue, the real venue, surrounded by the flowers I had actually wanted. Jessica, my best friend and maid of honor, kept looking at me with concern. "Are you really going to do this?" she asked as someone else was doing my hair. "I have to," I said. "Not just for me, but because what they did was wrong. They need to face consequences. They need to understand that you can't manipulate the people you claim to love." My parents still thought the wedding was at the community center, scheduled for 3 o'clock. I had sent them special invitations with the real venue information and a noon start time, but I had done it in a way that looked like a mistake, like I had accidentally sent them the vendor timeline instead of the guest timeline. When my mom called to clarify, I acted flustered and embarrassed. "Oh my gosh, I'm so scattered with everything going on. No, the wedding is definitely at 3 at the community center. That other invitation was just for the photographer and vendors, ignore that." I had lied smoothly, amazed at my own capacity for deception. I guess I had learned from the best. The real wedding started at 2 o'clock. All our actual guests received the correct information. The venue was absolutely stunning, everything I had dreamed of. The garden was in full bloom, the weather was perfect. The setup was magical. Marcus looked incredible waiting for me at the altar, and when I walked down the aisle in my real wedding dress, the one that made me feel like a princess, I saw tears streaming down his face. The ceremony was beautiful. We said our vows, we exchanged rings, we kissed as husband and wife. For those few moments, I forgot about everything else and just existed in the pure joy of marrying my best friend. Our guests cheered, we walked back down the aisle together, and the celebration began. The reception was in full swing, dinner had been served, toasts had been made, and people were starting to dance when I got the text I had been waiting for. It was from my dad. "Sweetheart, we're at the community center. Where is everyone? Are we at the wrong entrance?" I smiled, a cold smile that felt foreign on my face. I texted back, "Check your email. I sent you the correct venue information weeks ago. You should have time to make it if you leave now." Then I forwarded them the invitation with the real venue address, and I waited. They arrived 45 minutes later, flustered and confused. I watched them walk into the garden reception area, watched their faces as they took in the expensive venue, the elaborate decorations, the live band, the elegant setup. My mom's face went pale. My dad looked like he had been punched in the stomach. They found me on the dance floor. My mom rushed over, her smile forced and confused. "Honey, what's going on? This isn't the venue we planned. How did you afford all this?" "We need to talk," I said calmly. "Both of you, privately." I led them away from the reception to a quiet corner of the garden. Marcus came with me, his hand firmly in mine, my anchor in what was about to be a storm. "Sarah, I don't understand," my dad started. "You said you were downsizing the wedding. You said you wanted to be financially responsible." "No," I corrected him, my voice steady despite my pounding heart. "You wanted me to downsize the wedding. You needed me to save $45,000. Or more specifically, you needed me to save the $15,000 you were short for your investment opportunity." The color drained from both their faces. My mom actually stumbled backward a step. "I know everything," I continued. "I know about Paradise Investment. I know you withdrew $30,000 from your savings. I know you were $15,000 short of the minimum investment threshold. I know you orchestrated this entire campaign to pressure me into cutting my wedding budget so you could use my savings to fund your get-rich-quick scheme." "Sarah, let me explain," my dad started, but I held up my hand. "I heard you, Dad. I overheard your phone call about how my smaller wedding freed up exactly what you needed. And Mom, I heard you too, in the parking lot, telling someone that you convinced me to cut my budget so you'd have enough to invest. You said I was young and would have other opportunities, but this was your one chance." My mom's eyes filled with tears, but I felt nothing. No sympathy, no urge to comfort her like I normally would. "You manipulated me," I said, my voice breaking slightly, but I pushed through. "You used my love for you, my trust in you, as a weapon. You recruited family members to guilt me. You made me feel selfish and irresponsible and vain for wanting the wedding I had dreamed of. You watched me cry over cutting my guest list, over giving up the photographer I wanted, over buying a dress I hated. And you let me suffer through all of that because it served your purposes." "We were going to give you the money back," my mom whispered. "Once the investment paid out, we were going to help you with a house. We were going to." "You were going to do nothing," I interrupted, "because Paradise Investment is a scam. It's a Ponzi scheme. You're going to lose every penny you put into it." My dad's face went gray. "What? No, that's not," Robert assured us. "Robert is a con artist, Dad. I had Marcus look into it. The company doesn't exist. The testimonials are fake. The whole thing is designed to take money from desperate people looking for easy returns." I pulled out my phone and showed them the research Marcus had compiled. "You gambled with your financial security and destroyed my trust in you for a scam." We stood there in horrible silence. In the distance, I could hear the party continuing, music and laughter that felt like it was happening in another world. "I'm sorry," my mom finally said, tears streaming down her face. "Sarah, I'm so sorry. We made a terrible mistake. We got desperate. The business has been struggling. We saw this opportunity and we thought we were securing our future. We were going to make it up to you." "You can't make this up to me," I said flatly. "You can never make this up to me. You didn't just take money, you took my joy. You poisoned one of the happiest times of my life. Every time I look back on planning this wedding, I'll remember the pain you caused, the manipulation, the betrayal." "Please," my dad said, and I had never heard him sound so broken. "Please, Sarah, we're your parents. We love you. We made a horrible mistake, but we love you." "Love," I repeated the word like it was foreign. "You don't manipulate people you love. You don't lie to people you love. You don't prioritize your financial gain over their happiness. That's not love, Dad. I don't know what that is, but it's not love." Marcus squeezed my hand, reminding me he was there, supporting me. "Here's what's going to happen," I said, my voice stronger now. "You're going to leave my wedding. You're not going to make a scene. You're not going to try to talk to me or Marcus. You're going to quietly leave. And then you're going to give me space, a lot of space. I don't know if I'll ever be able to forgive this, but I know for certain that I can't even think about it right now." "Sarah, please don't do this," my mom begged. "Don't cut us out of your life. We can fix this. We can make it right." "You can't," I said simply, "and I need you to respect my decision. Leave now." They stood there for another moment, looking completely devastated. Part of me, the part that still remembered being a little girl who adored her parents, wanted to take it all back, wanted to hug them and forgive them and pretend none of this had happened. But I couldn't. I wouldn't. What they did was unforgivable, and I needed them to understand that. Finally, they turned and walked away. I watched them leave through the garden gate, my mother leaning on my father, both of them looking older and more broken than I had ever seen them. And I felt relief, like a massive weight had been lifted off my shoulders. Marcus wrapped his arms around me. "You did it," he whispered. "I'm so proud of you." I let myself lean into him for a moment, let myself process what had just happened. Then I straightened up, wiped my eyes, and said, "Let's go back to our wedding. We have a party to enjoy." And we did. We went back to the reception, and I danced with my husband. I laughed with my friends. I celebrated the beginning of our marriage in the venue I had wanted, wearing the dress I loved, surrounded by people who genuinely cared about us. It wasn't perfect. There was a sadness underneath the joy, a grief for the relationship with my parents that I had lost. But it was real, it was honest, and it was mine. Several family members approached me throughout the night. My grandmother hugged me tight and told me I had done the right thing, that boundaries were important even with family. My Aunt Linda apologized again for her part in the manipulation. Even some of my dad's siblings, who I had spoken with, came to offer their support. They had witnessed my parents leaving early, and they knew what had happened. The truth was going to spread through the family, and my parents would have to face the consequences of their actions with everyone, not just me. As the night wound down, as Marcus and I prepared to leave for our honeymoon, Jessica pulled me aside. "How are you really doing?" she asked. "I don't know," I admitted. "I'm happy. I'm married to the most amazing man, but I'm also heartbroken. I feel like I lost my parents today, even though they're still alive." "You lost the version of them you thought they were," Jessica said gently. "But Sarah, you gained something too. You gained your voice. You stood up for yourself. You set boundaries. That's powerful." She was right. For months, I had let myself be controlled, manipulated, pushed into decisions I didn't want to make. But I had found my strength again. I had stood up to the people who hurt me, even though they were my parents, even though it was hard. The weeks following the wedding were difficult. My parents tried to contact me multiple times. Texts, calls, emails, all of them begging for another chance, pleading for forgiveness. I didn't respond. I had told them I needed space, and I meant it. About a month after the wedding, my dad showed up at our apartment. Marcus answered the door and firmly told him that I wasn't ready to talk. My dad handed him an envelope and left. Inside was a letter, pages and pages of apologies and explanations. They admitted everything, explained how my dad's business had been struggling financially for over a year, how they had gotten desperate, how they had convinced themselves that the investment was legitimate and would solve all their problems. The letter also confirmed what I already knew. Paradise Investment had indeed been a scam. The whole operation had been shut down by federal authorities. My parents lost all $45,000 they had invested. They were now facing serious financial difficulties, potentially losing their home. Part of me felt vindicated. They had suffered consequences for their actions. But another part of me just felt sad. Sad that it had come to this, sad that their greed and desperation had destroyed our family. Marcus found me crying over the letter. "Do you want to help them?" he asked carefully. "No," I said, surprising myself with how quickly the answer came. They made their choices. They chose to manipulate me, to lie to me, to prioritize their financial problems over our relationship. They didn't come to me honestly and ask for help. They tricked me, and now they have to live with the consequences. It's been 6 months since the wedding now, 6 months since I confronted my parents. We've had no contact in all that time. I've heard through other family members that they had to sell their house, that they've downsized significantly, that they're struggling but surviving. They ask about me, apparently. They want to know if I'm ready to talk yet. I don't know if I'll ever be ready. Some betrayals are too deep to heal from. Some broken trust can't be repaired. I've been going to therapy, working through the complicated feelings of grief, anger, betrayal, and loss. My therapist has helped me understand that it's okay to set boundaries, even with family. It's okay to protect yourself from people who have hurt you, even if they're your parents. Marcus and I are building a beautiful life together, one based on honesty, trust, and mutual respect. We're planning to buy a house next year. We talk about having kids eventually. And when I think about becoming a parent myself, I think about what my parents did to me, and I make a promise to myself. I will never manipulate my children. I will never put my needs above theirs in such a destructive way. I will never use their love as a weapon against them. Looking back on everything that happened, I've learned some important lessons. First, trust your instincts. I felt something was wrong from the very beginning, but I ignored those feelings because I didn't want to believe my parents could hurt me. If something feels off, it probably is. Second, financial pressure from family members should always be questioned. If someone is pushing you very hard to make financial decisions that benefit them, even indirectly, ask yourself why. Real concern for your well-being looks different from manipulation. Third, you are allowed to set boundaries, even with the people who raised you. Family relationships don't give anyone the right to manipulate, control, or betray you. Love should be supportive, not controlling. Fourth, standing up for yourself is hard, but it's necessary. When I confronted my parents at my wedding, it was one of the hardest things I've ever done. But it was also one of the most important. I reclaimed my power, my voice, and my right to make my own choices. And finally, some relationships can't be saved, and that's okay. It's okay to grieve them. It's okay to be angry about them. It's okay to move forward without them. You don't owe anyone access to your life, not even family, if they've proven they can't be trusted with it. I don't know what the future holds for my relationship with my parents. Maybe someday, years from now, we'll be able to have some kind of relationship again. Maybe we won't. Right now, I'm focusing on my marriage, my own family that Marcus and I are building, and the relationships with people who have proven they deserve my trust. The garden wedding I fought to reclaim was beautiful. But more beautiful than the flowers or the venue or the dress was the moment I stood up for myself. That moment changed me. It showed me that I'm stronger than I thought, that I can survive betrayal, that I can set boundaries even when it hurts. To anyone watching this who might be dealing with manipulation from family members, I want you to know you are not crazy for feeling uncomfortable. You are not selfish for wanting what you want. You are not obligated to sacrifice your happiness for someone else's gain, not even for your parents. Your feelings matter. Your dreams matter. You matter. And if you're going through something similar, please talk to someone you trust. Don't try to handle family manipulation alone. Marcus was my rock through all of this. But I also leaned on friends and eventually a therapist. There's no shame in asking for help when you're dealing with betrayal from the people who were supposed to protect you. My wedding day was supposed to be about celebrating love, and in a way, it was. But it was also about learning that sometimes love means loving yourself enough to walk away from people who hurt you. Sometimes love means setting boundaries. Sometimes love means saying no. I'm Sarah, and this was my story. Thank you for listening. If this resonated with you, please share it. You never know who might need to hear it. And remember, no matter who is trying to manipulate you, you have the power to say no. You have the power to protect yourself. You have the power to choose your own path. Your dreams are valid. Your feelings are real. And you deserve better than to be used by the people who claim to love you.